Everything's fine. Everything's gonna be just fine. Please come back, Andrew. What is going on, everybody? Welcome into a deep dive into the 2021 Indianapolis Colts. This is going to be an interesting one. This really could not have come at a worse time, right around the news of Carson Wentz and his foot injury, along with their best player, Quenton Nelson, having a almost identical foot injury there. So lots of questions about what does this mean for the Colts season and specifically their power ranking here, as this is a power rankings series. I will get into that in just a minute here, but a couple pieces of housekeeping before we do that. First off, we have an amazing guest on this show, Zach Hicks, who covers the Colts for Sports Illustrated, hops on for a great conversation. We get into the Wentz injury, talk a little Jacob Eason, the Darius Leonard contract, lots of great stuff in that conversation. So make sure you stick around to the end, till that portion of the video. Also, make sure you guys hit that like button down below. Truly does help support the channel and get the video more views, so thank you in advance for that. And lastly, guys, you know I don't have a ton of time to do fantasy football content here on the channel, but every year I do make my own fantasy football rankings on my Patreon. So right now, you can head over to patreon.com/thatfranchiseguy. You'll get access to my full fantasy football draft board, which has positional rankings by tier, also full sortable stat projections for every position, and you'll support the channel in the process. So everybody in the $5 a month tier there on Patreon will get access to that, and there's also lots of great exclusive content there now and in the future. So great way to support the channel, beat your league mates, get in those draft rankings, and get other exclusive content as well. Appreciate you checking that out. It is patreon.com/thatfranchiseguy. So let's get into the Indianapolis Colts now. And as I mentioned, many people wondering, what does this mean for the Colts and the power rankings? And it's difficult. You know, I have a formula that really spits out overall grades for all these teams. I'm not a mathematician. I don't know how I can exactly account for an injury that has a range of, he's back, speaking of Carson Wentz, obviously, and Quenton Nelson now. You know, these guys could be back week 1, they could be back week 7. I don't fully know how to implement that into a formula, so I really have to just go off of gut feel and slide them in where I think they belong. And I'll continue to detail a little bit more specifically if you want to focus in on the grades that come into play here. I will get a little more specific with those as we go and what this means for the team, but really for the overall ranking, it just has to come down to gut feel, and that is where they slide into 19th for me. I don't think their season is done. I really don't believe that. I still have a lot of confidence in Frank Reich, and frankly some confidence in Carson Wentz to get back healthy and at this point prove some people wrong, where there's almost this consensus vibe that the season's done now. I'm not going there quite yet, though this is a significant blow for the team. But we're going to go ahead and start, as we always do, with this team's offseason before we get into Carson Wentz and the rest of this roster, ranking each position group, how they stack up against the rest of the league. But let's start with the key departures and the key additions for this offseason. Very much par for the course, kind of an eye for an eye style offseason, as every significant piece they lost, for the most part, they just went ahead and replaced, or at least attempt to. Phillip Rivers retires, so they go and acquire Carson Wentz. Anthony Costanzo retires, so they go and sign Eric Fisher. Justin Houston leaves in free agency, they draft Kwity Paye. Really, the only significant player from last year that they didn't effectively replace was Denico Autry, who was kind of a hybrid defensive end, but they have bodies in place. And you could argue that the Dayo Odeyingbo pick in the second round was replacing Denico Autry as well. So very much a par for the course offseason. They do get Marvell Tell back from opt-out, was a promising corner. Paris Campbell and Marlon Mack were week 1 injuries that they get back. So getting some other players added to the 2021 installment of this team. But for the most part, this team is going to continue to lean on youth, and have that confidence in the guys that they have drafted to really step up and continue to build something here, which is why this series is perfect. We're going to talk about every player on the roster who could step up and potentially surprise this year and who might be perhaps a little more of a concern. So we'll get into all of that as we go through position by position, but we are going to start with the quarterback here, where it obviously gets complicated, but for me, they are going to rank 18th. Without Carson Wentz in there, they have the worst quarterback situation in the league. So again, I don't know exactly how to play the numbers here, but with Carson Wentz in there, I do project him to be a top 20 quarterback in the NFL. I think there's obviously a lot of blame that you can point at Carson Wentz for, frankly, playing like a bottom 5 quarterback in the NFL last year. He deserves a lot of that blame. But I think also just kind of taking a step back, getting ripped out of his situation in Philadelphia, there's reason to believe he can basically stop playing hero ball and believe in a new system and get back to the basics of quarterback play, just kind of a 1 step back, 2 steps forward style approach off the field. But just the situation itself, I did call Doug Peterson the worst coach in the NFL last year. I firmly believe that. I mean, yeah, he's won a Super Bowl, and over the last 3 years or whatever, he's not the worst coach. But just strictly speaking of the on-field product and the preparation that team had, I've said it before and I'll say it again, the Eagles led the league in snap to WTF is going on plays, as in, it looked like a elementary school play where, yeah, they may have rehearsed, but the second they start the play, it's just, it's like a chicken show. No one knew what was going on out there. So it was a lot of stuff like that in Philadelphia that was a complete mess, and that's not all Carson Wentz's fault. So I think getting here in Indianapolis, I had and still have, it's weird that we're talking past tense, a lot of confidence in Carson Wentz. The talent is all there. The pocket presence is exceptional in my opinion. He's really good at extending plays. Dare I say, elite at it. He has exceptional arm talent. But what fell off was the mechanics, the confidence, and the accuracy. So it's all about, getting back to the basics here, which I do actually really believe in the Colts to be able to get that out of him. But if he can't stay healthy, it's not going to matter. And while I think people are writing him off already this year, I don't think that's fair. I think he can come back week 3, 4, 5, 6. It is just a foot injury. I think he will be healthy at some point this season. So if that happens, I think we can get back on course maybe quicker than some people think with the optimistic revival of Carson Wentz here. Now, if he doesn't play till week 8, they could be out of it by the time he comes back. And the last thing I'll say there is that could actually be a best case scenario for the Colts, where he comes back, he looks great, you have a ton of optimism heading into next year, and then they get to keep their first round pick, whereas 2022 is really the year with hype and Super Bowl talk. So I really don't think it's all hope is lost here. I still believe in Carson Wentz. It's just this is another piece of evidence that says Carson Wentz can't stay healthy, which is just a total bummer. There's no other way to word that. And we're just going to have to wait and see if he can get healthy. And then we can start talking about his on-field performance and can he shake off whatever cloud was put on top of him. Because the quarterback we saw in 2019 was not the MVP Carson Wentz, and 2020 I should say, was not the MVP Carson Wentz that we saw on the Super Bowl Eagles team. You do have Jacob Eason behind him, who's worth talking about. Ended up being a 4th round pick. I had a 2nd to a 3rd round grade on him. Excellent arm talent, just literally top 10 arm in the league as a backup. It's everything else that he does not have. He doesn't have mobility, he doesn't have pocket presence, and he's not particularly good with his processing and decision making. I do think he comes in, he lets it rip. They also probably get either Ellinger or now signing Brett Hundley involved in some sort of wildcat stuff, as they liked to do already last year with Phillip Rivers as their quarterback, bringing in Jacoby Brissett. So I do think they can get creative and find ways with this offensive line to get the ball moving and hopefully lean on their defense, but it is going to be an inferior product for sure to having Carson Wentz out there and being able to run the full offense. I don't really see huge upside in Jacob Eason. Technically speaking, he has it because of that arm talent, but he just has so far to go that I'm not really going to hedge my bets on Jacob Eason. So ranking 18th kind of with an asterisk there where the injury just complicates this thing. But that's where I was at on Wentz pre-injury and where I stand now. Running back room is going to come in 11th for me, which is going to throw Jonathan Taylor pretty close to that top 10 running back conversation after his rookie season. My pre-draft comp for Jonathan Taylor was blue-collar Leonard Fournette, and really by the end of last season, that's what we saw. A slow start for JT, but man, he picked it up in the second half of the season and did look like a top 10 runner of the football. And there's no reason to believe that won't continue here. Again, there's a lot of really talented running backs in the NFL. He's right there with Zeke, in my opinion, right around that 10 range. So really no criticisms of Jonathan Taylor. He even impressed in the receiving game as well. He is that full steam ahead, has the breakaway speed. Again, Leonard Fournette with blue-collar work ethic. The one little note I have on him is he's right now ESPN's 7th ranked fantasy running back. And I don't spend a lot of time talking about fantasy, but this thought did come to my mind with those fantasy rankings getting released here this week. There's a lot of expectations for JT to statistically kick ass. I think he'll be incredibly efficient and grade out incredibly well and could finish the year as a quote-unquote top 10 running back by the tape. But with Marlon Mack here and Nyheim Hines, who are perfectly capable backs, and the style that this team plays with, I don't see the volume being there for Jonathan Taylor to have this amazing statistical season. I think it'll be very good, but I picture this almost like a diminished version of Nick Chubb for Cleveland. So I just want to throw that out there for those of you thinking of statistical expectations for JT. Mine are lower than the consensus because I do think Marlon Mack is a good running back, and I don't think they bring him back in free agency if they just don't want to use him. So I do think Marlon Mack continues to see 30% of the carries or so here. He is stylistically fairly similar to Jonathan Taylor. He has good straight line speed. His vision is exceptional, and I think he's a nice complement. And then you also have Nyheim Hines, who is not just a scat back. He actually has surprising vision. He can break some arm tackles, and he's very good at getting skinny, even in those short yardage situations. Before JT really broke out late in the season, Nyheim Hines was their best short yardage back, really from, weeks, I would say 2 through 7. I don't know. So he is effective as well, and on those third down situations, he's an amazing receiving back. So again, he is going to take some of that workload away from Jonathan Taylor as well. It's a crowded running back room. It's incredibly deep. They're going to be injury averse as they'll have multiple guys that can step in and wear different hats. You even have some decent depth behind them. Wilkins is a skilled running back, just lacks the physical upside. Jackson, kind of the opposite coming out of Duke, a really high-end athlete, but just did not produce at a high level, didn't show the best vision or receiving ability, but I do think here he could be a better pro than he was in college. And then Anderson and LeMay aren't bad either, so really deep running back room. They rank 11th in the league, and they're going to really lean on these guys as well early on in the season as they have Jacob Eason in there at quarterback. The receiving room coming up next, it's going to rank 28th, which I kept looking at it like, God, that sounds really low, 28th at receiver. But just looking at my rankings, I'm like, man, there are a lot of good receiving cores in the NFL. I mean, the 3 teams above them, you've got Las Vegas, Philadelphia, and Jacksonville. Maybe you could make a case for Philadelphia, but there's a lot of good receiving cores in the NFL. I don't think this is going to be a liability for this team, though I don't see it as a strength. So you have T.Y. Hilton, who can still play, still a highly effective route runner. He's a deep threat. His speed is tapered off, and I've always thought he was a little overrated with the ball in his hands after the catch, but still a very capable, vertical number 2 receiver. It is that lack of a number 1 guy that I guess kind of drags this team down, even below a Philadelphia, because I think Devontae Smith has a chance to be that guy. So just explaining that a little bit. But you have Michael Pittman, who's a good receiver. I think his ceiling is kind of Mike Williams. I really don't see him and never did see him as a guy that can be an alpha, but really good ball skills. Showed to be really good with the ball in his hands after the catch. A great run blocker, consistent hands. Just a good receiver, though I just don't really see him being a high-end separator at any point. But for a second-round pick, I think you're more than happy with what you have in him. The X factor here is Paris Campbell, and I talk about him with Zach Hicks, so I won't go too far here, but needless to say, when he came in healthy last year, like week 1, something popped. It wasn't just, oh, Paris Campbell's healthy, he looks pretty good. It was, whoa, that's different. He looks like an elite receiver, and then he gets hurt again. So obviously health being what's held Paris Campbell back, but healthy now. And he, to me, is the guy to look at and say, this is the guy with really high-end upside, the guy that can be that go-to separator and focal point of the receiving game. So if he stays healthy, if they can get Carson Wentz back as well, I do think stock up on Paris Campbell. And then Zach Pascal, an underrated player, though kind of in that same mold as Michael Pittman. So the volume there and how big of an impact he can make is limited. Possibly the best run-blocking receiver in the entire NFL, as Larry Fitzgerald's not on a team currently. So you like that about him. He is the ultimate Colt here as they preach sort of that toughness, try-hard mentality. Zach Pascal is that in a nutshell, was a waiver wire street pickup for this team from the Titans, and he's been kind of the ultimate revenge story interdivision, coming in and proving himself to be a quality starter there. So I like Zach Pascal. It's just how much is he on the field? That's a legitimate question. Behind him, you have some names. Ashton Dulin got on the field for them last year, kind of whatever there. But DeMichael Harris is fascinating. He is right in that conversation for me that I feel like I keep talking about with this trend of 5'7", 5'6" receivers finding their path in the modern NFL where you can't press these guys and hit them down the field. There's a reason to believe that a guy like DeMichael Harris could work out in the NFL. So keep an eye on him. J.J. Nelson, I don't see him making the team. Patman and Strachan probably competing for that wide receiver 6 spot as that kind of vertical possession, go-get-it guy. Vaughns and Gary Jennings kind of in that same mold. Courtney Davis is an interesting guy to have around here, a guy with good route running coming out of Texas A&M, kind of a Senior Bowl sleeper, fan favorite type of guy. Seems like a really high character guy as well. So I'd love to see Courtney Davis make the team. And then Tariq Black was a highly recruited player at Michigan. So there's some players and a good competition to hopefully have some guys kind of emerge through the woodworks there with that wide receiver room. This Colts team's been very good at getting guys to step up. The tight end room is very good. You have Mo Alley Cox, that basketball profile, so good at boxing guys out, had a really nice rapport with Phillip Rivers, who had a similar style tight end in Antonio Gates. But you got to applaud how Mo Alley Cox has learned the physical side of football, learning how to be a very good blocker in there, and to me is a slightly better player than Jack Doyle, though those guys are very similar, both very sure-handed, contested catch options, neither great separators, neither great route runners, but both, comparable in size, hands, and run blocking. So they'll probably see a lot of 12 personnel, especially early on, with Wentz out, and they'll both be on the field and be reliable targets. They draft Kylen Granson to be the replacement to Trey Burton, who they let leave in free agency, as a little more of an undersized, separating type of flex tight end. An interesting prospect who I certainly wouldn't be surprised to see work out here. And then a competition behind them, Togiai, who got on the field last year, Thomas, who's a massive tight end who flamed out for the Texans interdivision there. One of those two probably makes it. And then the running back room, we talked about these guys already, but Nyheim Hines is one of the, I would say, 5 to 10 best receiving backs in the NFL. Has continued to hone his craft. He is an exceptional route runner. He has great hands. He is explosive in space. He'll make guys miss, but also can run away and have some big plays. So he is phenomenal, and they're going to get him on the field, which again comes back to Jonathan Taylor getting maybe less touches than some people may be projecting. But Taylor also surprised in the receiving game. So it's kind of pick your poison here with Frank Reich. Both these guys super effective, and I was really surprised to see Taylor kind of catching the ball as fluid as he did in space and creating some big plays in the receiving game, being that reliable third down target in the flat, something he just didn't do at Wisconsin. That was kind of his biggest criticism, was fumbles and catching the ball, really ball security in general. And very quickly, he weeded those things out of his game. Marlon Mack, kind of an afterthought there, but he's not bad. So you have a lot of different weapons here. You just don't have any truly explosive vertical. I shouldn't even say vertical. You just don't have those kind of go-to options. But if schemed up appropriately, you're going to have players that can make some plays here. So they do rank 28th. It feels low, as I mentioned. But again, so many good receivers and receiving cores in the league right now. Let's go ahead and move on to this offensive line, who also, at this point, you could probably throw an injury asterisk next to as well, which is something we haven't really had throughout this series. But as we get closer to the season, we're seeing some of these injuries pop up. And they already had a unique situation there with Eric Fisher, who they signed, who I believe either tore an ACL or an Achilles, something like that. It was a major injury in the conference championship round. So signing him, it was a question mark on if and when he's going to be ready. And then you also have Quentin Nelson going down with the same foot injury, it sounds like, that Carson Wentz had. And sounds like he is going to miss at least the first week, maybe two of the season. So all of a sudden you're leaning on depth. Now we'll talk about the depth. They're somewhat well prepared there. So just pointing out that there are some injury questions here, but it shouldn't be long before these guys are all out there together. And when they are, to me, they are the 4th ranked offensive line in the NFL, which is by far the biggest asset that this team has. So let's just assume health moving forward. You're going to have a good tackle duo in Braden Smith, who just got a large right tackle contract, well deserved. He has been really a monster and a rock and a well above average right tackle, probably a top, let's just leave it at top 10 right tackle for now. I'd need to look at a list, but he's up there. Eric Fisher is a good pass protector and should be pretty close to a equal replacement to Anthony Costanzo. Not a long-term option there, but was a good free agent signing. And there's, I think, still a lot of good football in there for Eric Fisher. Was actually the number 1 overall pick back in the day. Didn't live up to those expectations, but it's not like he's been a bust. So that was a good signing. They needed that left tackle. Some people question why they didn't go that route in the draft. Well, signing Eric Fisher shows why, but he's got to get healthy. And then at center, you have Ryan Kelly, who's a very solid do-it-all center, very heady player, good at recognizing blitzes and all that stuff. You're very happy with Ryan Kelly there. And then, of course, Big Q at left guard. Huge injury to lose him. He's the best player on this team. And, God, we could go on forever about what he does at such a high level. You just go down the list of what you want in a guard, and Quentin Nelson comes to mind pretty much first for everything, whether it's anchor in pass protection, whether it's technique and quickness and being able to handle stunts. He's got that. Whether it's the awareness. I mean, he has the best awareness in the NFL of any offensive lineman, just the way he sees things from across the field. Multiple times you'll see him saving the quarterback by basically abandoning his left guard position and just dipping out and picking up a blitzing safety or a linebacker. You talk about the run game. He's got get off and strength, and most importantly, the mentality to want to run block, and the physical traits as well. He's at the top. So he was a top draft pick for a reason. He is an elite player in the NFL. Either him or Zach Martin, in my opinion, are the best guard in football. And it's going to be a hit when he's out. But again, he should be able to get back on the field rather quickly, in my opinion. I feel like he'll probably be back before Carson Wentz, by my estimation, because he's an offensive lineman, and these guys are tough as nails and play through pain all the time. Not that Wentz isn't tough, but also I don't think he doesn't need to drive off of that foot to throw an accurate 40-yard post or anything. It's a little bit more technical with the quarterback position. And then your right guard is Mark Glowinski. This was an excellent pickup for this front office, and he's, I would just say he's great for a weak link, quote unquote. He's not really a weak link. He'd be a starter on pretty much any team in the league. He's a very good player. and he's athletic. So to have him as your fifth best lineman is certainly more than good enough. So they have some injury questions there. Should be able to get these guys back healthy and compete for being the best offensive line moving forward. The depth here is pretty good, for depth. It is offensive line depth. You're worried if you get to your depth. That applies to every team in the league. And it does look like they're going to have to lean on Sam Tevi early on, Chris Reed at left guard. So that's not ideal, but it is good depth. And then some other guys there. Pinter has played okay in small opportunities. Will Fries was a nice 7th-round pick. And then they have Will Holden, who, he's not good, but is okay depth and just also happens to have the worst name for an offensive lineman ever. Joey Hunt's a good backup center as well. So they have good depth across the board, really, for the offensive line that ranks 4th. And now it gets interesting as we talk about the overall offensive rankings. So pre these injuries, they ranked 16th. Now, if you just say right now, without Quentin Nelson, without Carson Wentz, I actually think they're the 31st ranked offense in the NFL because that offensive line takes a step back without Quentin Nelson, which is their biggest strength. It all of a sudden becomes, I would just say, an average offensive line. And then you have the worst quarterback play in the NFL by my projections, barring a Jacob Eason stunning performance. So, week 1, week 2, week 3, until those guys get back, they're the 31st ranked offense. Now, as I've mentioned, I don't think these are season-ending injuries. I think these guys come back before I would just say the first third of the season is over. And when healthy, I have them really smack dab in the middle with the 16th best offense. And part of that is, I think, Frank Reich and his kind of modern pro-style West Coast offense is the 10th best offensive coaching staff in the league and is a very well-run offense. They lean into these running backs, the offensive line, the tight ends, all things that a lesser quarterback in Jacob Eason should be able to maximize. So it's really, to me, about staying afloat until you can get Carson Wentz back healthy, and then you're hoping that everything else we just detailed with Frank Reich and the offensive line and a versatility of playmakers and a great running game, then you're starting to talk about, okay, let's get Carson Wentz rolling. But they're also going to have to lean on this defense quite a bit if they want to keep this season alive. So let's flip over to that side of the ball, starting with the run defense here. Really nice interior duo there. And by the way, the run defense is going to rank 9th in the league. So starting off with the top 10 group against the run. And a big part of this is that kind of blue-collar culture and coaching that they've established here. This is a try-hard running defense, if you will. And that is epitomized by Grover Stewart, who has developed very nicely here. He is a premium nose tackle in the NFL and just got paid handsomely to play that role. Also playing next to DeForest Buckner, who has really emerged as, I would say, a top 3 interior defensive lineman. Now, more of that has to do with his ability as a pass rusher, but his ability to kind of be a splashy run defender is very valuable as well, because he is, 6'7", 300 pounds. You will see a lot of plays where offensive linemen get their pads up inside of him, and he doesn't have the best strength for a defensive tackle. He has great strength for his build, but there are moments where he can get moved off his spot. But he compensates that very well by having outstanding awareness in critical downs. You'll see him make those splash plays on 3rd and 4th down and really win with his mind and kind of bendiness on the inside. And he can still be a critical run defender in big moments, but he's also, very flexible as more of that 3 technique because you have Grover Stewart as that nose tackle. So he's a very good run defender in a unique style. And then you have Grover Stewart, who just doesn't get moved off his spot, who's a phenomenal nose tackle. Great interior duo. I will say the depth there is very concerning. Taylor Stallworth had some moments for the Saints several years ago, but he has flamed out. Based on, I'm kind of giving him a lot of benefit of the doubt there with that 70 grade because the Colts seem to have a lot of confidence in him to be the number 2 interior defensive tackle. I also would not be surprised at all to see them pick somebody else up, because Robert Windsor was a 6th-round pick last year. It sounds like he's done for the year now, so we'll see if they add someone there. It's an incredibly thin group of interior defensive linemen. Antoine Woods, Chris Williams, we haven't seen anything from those guys, and Andrew Brown, kind of in that Danico Autry mold as an undersized guy, could surprise in that role where Autry played really well, but hard to expect that. So you're more than fine with your starting 2 on the interior, but the depth is concerning to say the least. The edge players, at least from a starting viewpoint here, Kwity Paye and should be Al-Quadin Muhammad, who they bring back on a contract extension. Muhammad was actually a part of that legendary Saints draft class with Kamara and Ramczyk and Marcus Williams and Marshawn Lattimore, and he actually didn't make that team. So the Colts pick him up, and he's been a very good player for a 7th-round pick. He is kind of that typical, I would say, Belichickian edge player where he plays with discipline, effort, length, and just control of that edge gap. And he's very good at it. So they bring him back for a reason. Kwity Paye on the other side should be a good run defender. He is a rookie, so definitely room to improve from that 74 grade, but he has the size and quickness to actually well surprise and well outperform that 74 grade. And then you have a bunch of other bodies, a bunch of unproven players against the run, but really a bunch of guys with potential to do it. You've got Taekwon Lewis, Ben Bonigo, Dayo Odeyingbo, and Kemoko Toure. These guys were all really 2nd-round picks, I think all 4 of those guys. Toure was, let's see, where was Toure? Yeah, 2nd-round pick for all of these guys. All of them have the size to play the run as well, especially Dayo Odeyingbo, who's closer to like a defensive tackle in a lot of size metrics. So you're hoping these guys step up. They have not done so at this point in time. And as far as Dayo is concerned, I was really underwhelmed with how he played the run at Vanderbilt. I thought he played, frankly, very soft at times, to be blunt. So they need these guys to step up and buy into that blue-collar culture. And if they do, you're going to probably exceed this 9th-ranked run defense. But that is up in the air right now. And then the linebackers, you obviously have Darius Leonard in there. I've been very vocal about Darius Leonard being an overrated player. I think he is a top 7 linebacker in the NFL. Really, the only people that think Darius Leonard is a top 4 linebacker in the NFL are Darius Leonard and Darius Leonard fans. Nobody else really sees him that way. That's really all I'm going to say about him, and I'll just point out his strengths. I mean, he's extremely good in space, sideline to sideline. There's very few linebackers with better tackling ability in space, and he brings the leadership that you look for from a Mike linebacker. He gets everybody in position and in the right gaps, and he also has some of that ability to get skinny and make some big critical stops on those short yardage situations as well. Extremely instinctive at finding his way into the backfield and bringing down some of the best backs in football. So it's not that he doesn't have really good traits. I will say, he is a little on the lighter side. He technically says he plays at like 215. I'd say he looks closer to 225, 230. He's not a high-end thumper. He can get kind of bodied when he does make contact with those guards, which is fine. Most linebackers these days are playing closer to that size. But when you're not an elite cover player and you're not, Devin White, and ability to thump isn't elite, that's where you get into some of those debates about how much a player like this is worth. But as a run defender, he's very, very good and a high impact there. And then next to him, it's not great. Bobby Okereke, I think, is just a more coverage-minded player. He always has been. So you don't really see him playing with a ton of physicality against the run, but he's fine. He has some size to do it. You have Zaire Franklin next to him. I saw that he had a captain's badge in his photo. They must like him here. The linebacker room in general, it's really an open competition if you ask me. Franklin's the one that's gotten those reps, and he's graded out well, and he's been in there, but speed they drafted last year, Adams, Glasgow. I actually kind of like Sky Moore. Should be an open competition, and the guy that wants to play the run and do it at a high level is probably going to be the guy that wins that job. I'm not necessarily worried considering, it's 2021, and that third linebacker is not really on the field very much. It's really about Leonard and Okereke here. And then if you're wondering how these grades give you the 9th ranked run defense, other than just the coaching and mentality that this team has, they also have a notably great secondary against the run. You got Kenny Moore in the slot, who's a premium slot corner and an excellent run defender. And Xavier Rhodes is a phenomenal run defending corner, really tough guy to block out there on the perimeter. And also, Kari Willis is a great run defending safety as well. So they do have guys that will come up and make this a difficult defense to get the edge on. And those interior guys make it tough to get the inside. So very well-crafted run defense here, and they come in 9th in the NFL. As for the pass rush, I'm not quite as optimistic, where they're going to come in 18th. As I mentioned, DeForest Buckner has really emerged, I would say, as of last year, as a premium top 3 elite defensive tackle. It's weird. You say elite, I still think Chris Jones and DeForest Buckner, yeah, they might be a tier below Aaron Donald, but they're still elite players. Just because Aaron Donald is quite arguably the best player in NFL history, it doesn't mean Buckner and Chris Jones, those guys aren't elite. Those guys make incredible impacts as pass rushers. Buckner's swim move with his lengthy 6'7" frame and the quickness and strength he has at that size, it's unblockable. So he's going to almost single-handedly make this 18th. Now, they draft Kwity Paye. I would say you're going to get close to what you got from Justin Houston there. I like Kwity Paye as a prospect. I think that was right around where he should have been drafted in the early 20s. He has extremely high-end quickness at really big size. He's almost 270 pounds. My comp for him is Za'Darius Smith, who is actually very similar at about 6'4", 270 pounds, and is a guy that wins with rare quickness at his size. And a lot of the ways Za'Darius Smith wins is on stunts that, say what you want about Mike Pettin in Green Bay, they did scheme up Za'Darius Smith very well. And I think if they can do that with Kwity Paye and DeForest Buckner, that's the world where Kwity Paye can get into just where Za'Darius Smith is, kind of on the fringe of being an alpha edge number 1 rusher and a high-end number 2, which for me, that's his ceiling. So we'll see if he gets that as a rookie year. Probably not, but it's possible. And then behind him, I'm really not optimistic. We mentioned that edge competition. Al-Qadim Muhammad is the guy that got the most edge snaps last year, and he's out there so much as a run defender. I just list him as the starter here, but he's not the guy that they're going to be giving the third down reps to. So slide in Tyquan Lewis for now, who is just okay. He's got some length and power and get off. He was fine. But I look at Kamoko Toure, who burst onto the scene as a rookie and hasn't been able to stay healthy. Ben Bonnigu, who really hasn't been able to be on the field much. And then Dayo Odeyingbo, who they just spent a second-round pick on. Those are really the 4 guys that you're hoping just somebody can step up as a quality number 2 option. That's one of the biggest pivot points for this defense, and it's really just wait and see, because they all have the physical ability to get there. It's just a matter of them reaching it. As for Dayo Odeyingbo, I'm not going to lie, man, I'm not a believer. I kept going back to the film as we got closer and closer to the draft, because he was starting to get this hype as a second, third round player, whereas I had him as a 5th round player. And that happens sometimes. I see other analysts like a guy, and I'll go and watch him, and I'll see something that I didn't see the first time through. And it didn't happen with Dayo. And then I watched him again, and it didn't happen again. And I watched him again, it didn't happen again. I got to 4 or 5 games, and I ended up more impressed by Andre Mintz, who was an undrafted pickup for the Broncos next to Dayo than I was by Dayo. Man, I'm willing to believe in Frank Reich, and I think they are excellent drafters. They obviously are. But at this position, it hasn't happened. Kamoko Toure, Bonnigu, Tyquan Lewis, those guys haven't hit. And I would be worried that Dayo was an overdraft. So I will put that out there. I think he has a long, long ways to go. You saw some flashes in there, but that's exactly what we've said about these other guys here. So I don't know, man. I'm not a Dayo guy. I really hope he proves me wrong and it becomes their Danico Autry with almost identical measurements at 6'5", 280 pounds. But I will put that out there, that I thought that was a massive reach, one of the biggest reaches in the entire class. And then we mentioned the interior depth is pretty brutal. I mean, keep an eye on Andrew Brown to, I guess, compete with Dio for that Danico Autry role as that kind of 4-eye, 3 technique that can come in. But with Grover Stewart being a true nose tackle and someone that I'm never really expecting to be a high-end pass rusher, you also don't have much of an interior rush. It's really about putting DeForest Buckner next to Kwity Paye's physical traits, and that alone should give you a decent pass rush. They rank 18th, so I don't think this is a weakness, but I also don't see it as a true strength either. They'll scheme it up well, and they have some good players, but ultimately, it's fine. It's a good pass rush here. And now the linebacker grade, where they're going to come in 8th. Again, I see Darius Leonard in that 6 to 9 range. I think he's in a cluster right now with Miles Jack, with Demario Davis, and with Roquan Smith. I don't think Darius Leonard is as good in coverage as those players, but I see some of the flashes and the big stuff he does as well. A phenomenal blitzer as well, and just an overall ultra instinctive player. He just sees things develop that he kind of has that sixth sense, if you will. So a very good player. And we talk about the contract situation for Darius Leonard with Zach Hicks. I'm really not afraid to say that he's not a top 4 linebacker in the NFL. I've seen all these linebackers play, and he just can't do things in coverage that Eric Kendricks, Fred Warner, Bobby Wagner, and Levante David do. He doesn't get the depth, he's not as good in man coverage, and he doesn't have the same zone IQ. So I'm not afraid to say it. I know the criticism's coming because I've never seen a hive of fans like the Darius Leonard truthers. But I'm convicted in that opinion, and I'm prepared for the backlash. Many people agree with me as well. As I said, really only Darius Leonard and Darius Leonard fans think he's a top 4 linebacker in the NFL. You want to rank him 5th? That's fine by me. As for the rest of these guys, Bobby Okereke, I think he's actually okay in coverage. You can make an argument he's better than Darius Leonard in coverage. The Colts certainly kind of think that way because Okereke, more often than not, is the guy playing those deeper zones. Like when they go cover 2, it's usually Okereke running that mid-read where he has to get a little deeper. They'll do it with Leonard as well. It's not to a T that way, but the majority of those deeper zones are Okereke's responsibility. And he's a good athlete. And going back to his Stanford days, he plays with kind of that heady, almost safety-esque approach to the game. I think he's a pretty good player and could be due for a better season this upcoming year. And then it's, again, just total competition. We haven't seen a ton from any of these guys. Zaire Franklin, EJ Speed, those would be the 2 guys I look to say they probably win the LB3 job. I also like Sky Moore. I think he has crazy good zone instincts going back to his days in college. Just not a great athlete. He ended up, I think, opting out last year, so the fact that he's still here as that low-level roster player, I think, speaks to how they see him as a potential impact here. Glasgow as well, a young player with some upside. So they have some bodies here. They've obviously drafted well at this position, so I wouldn't be surprised to see one of these guys really emerge behind Darius Leonard. But it's really about Leonard and Okereke, where they rank 8th. It's a really good linebacking core. And now the secondary, where they're going to come in 18th in the NFL. Very average group with decent starters across the board, but no star talent. You got Xavier Rhodes, who was just such a good pickup. There's a lot of Zimmer references in this defense, just the way they call their coverages, and he was really comfortable from day one here. A lot of cover 3 here where he can press, but also just super comfortable and a heady player in zone. And they do a good job to kind of limit his weaknesses with his quickness in man coverage and some of that stuff. So it's kind of funny, he's a guy that I thought was always overrated in Minnesota, but he's been the same guy here in Indianapolis and no one talks about him anymore. But it's kind of balanced out in that way. So he's a good starter at corner. And then you have Rock Ya-Sin and TJ Carey and Marvell Tell really competing for that second cornerback spot. TJ Carey is the best of those 3, at least the more consistent one at this point in time. But I do think they lean on Rock Ya-Sin at least early to see what he can do now in year 3. He has had some moments. He baited Aaron Rodgers into an interception last year, and he's always been kind of that playmaker style of corner where he's going to take those risks, especially in zone coverage, but also just not a good athlete. He does get obliterated in any sort of man or match situation, and he just doesn't have high-end speed. So I don't know. I think Xavier Rhodes is a good mentor and almost a good stylistic comp for Rock Ya-Sin. Marvell Tell, frankly, I think has the higher upside. He was kind of a converted safety, ended up opting out last year, and I think there's going to be an opportunity for him to take that cornerback 2 spot. I would say in this whole secondary, he would be the guy I look at and say he has kind of breakout potential. So we'll see. TJ Carey, if he ends up winning that job, it's fine. It's just not very exciting because you'd rather see younger players step up in that corner position. You got Kenny Moore in the slot. He's one of the 3 or 4 best slot corners in the NFL. Had to put that picture of his one-handed interception on Darren Waller. Just such a cool moment. We spent all this time talking about, slot corners, 5'9", 5'10". They're not supposed to be able to cover a Darren Waller, who's 6'5" and one of the best red zone threats in the world. Well, Kenny Moore says, "Watch this," and he elevates, shows off that vertical, and gets a one-handed interception. So just a really cool moment for Kenny Moore, kind of a breakout moment for him, even though he's been that good of a player for a while here. After those 5, it's going to be a competition probably for a 6th spot here. Isaiah Rodgers adds value as a kick returner, so that's probably who gets the job. But you have Holton Hill, who's a good athlete, has just had off-the-field troubles, and then a bunch of other names, frankly, not all that much worth mentioning. The safety room's pretty good. Julian Blackmon, kind of like Xavier Rhodes, the ebbs and flows of an NFL analyst, I suppose. When the Colts drafted Julian Blackmon, I caught heat for saying, look out for him to take Malik Hooker's job and eventually replace him. Colts fans were mad about that because Malik Hooker was the dude at the time. Well, now about, 10 months later, I'm saying Julian Blackmon had a really good rookie season, but he's not in the rookie defensive rookie of the year conversation, and all of a sudden I'm a Julian Blackmon hater. Oh, the ebbs and flows of this job. I love Julian Blackmon. It doesn't mean he was a perfect rookie. He had his ups and downs, but for a rookie, he looked great, and he should step in and continue to grow as that true free safety there. Was one of my guys, and I called him one of the sleeper steal picks of the draft when it happened. So kind of frustrating to have Colts fans come at me for saying I'm too low on Julian Blackmon, but I also got to be realistic there. So Julian Blackmon, good starting free safety. Khari Willis next to him, a bit of a limited player in coverage, just doesn't have the speed and the movement skills back there, but in space, a very good tackler. Ideal for those cover 3s that they like to run, where he'll be that box safety. And in those hook zones, he's a good player. It's just he's a limited player. He's not the best, quarters safety as far as flipping around and getting deep in man coverage and just sideline to sideline. He's a good, strong safety. It doesn't add a ton in coverage. George Odom, I think they like him. He's probably the 3rd safety, though they did sign Sean Davis, who just has higher physical upside as more of a free safety. So just decent safety depth. They don't go to a ton of 3 safety looks here. It's mostly 2 safety. And then they have another Sean Davis out of Florida. Another pick that I just wasn't a fan of. It was a 5th round pick, so whatever, really, as you get that late in the draft, but was really uninspired by his coverage abilities. Is a kind of headhunter type. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know. We just saw a player in Carolina get kicked off the team for being a headhunter type, but he does play with that kind of downhill, light you up style. But yeah, just as a coverage player, he doesn't have the athleticism and really just doesn't play with much technique or IQ back there at all. And then Campbell and Milligan, okay depth, special team types. You can kind of see why they rank 18th. You don't have any major weaknesses here, but you don't point to anybody and you're like, oh my God, look out for him, right? So 18th, a decent talent, well-coached secondary. And all of this spits out the 12th ranked defense. It's a very good defense. And I think it's going to be very similar to what they were last year. And again, this is where Colts fans are going to come at me because I said they're kind of a borderline top 10 defense last year. They're a very sound defense. They're well coached. They're disciplined. They tackle well. But you just don't have that, elite impact other than, DeForest Buckner helps get them up there sometimes. But beyond him, you're not really getting elite playmaking from anybody else here. And it's hard to be a dominant fear factor style defense. I don't think anybody looks at this Colts defense coming into the week and they're like, oh my God, they are going to just devastate us. It's We have to play really smart. We have to execute and not make mistakes. But it's not like it's a defense that will force you off of what you want to do all that much. So take that for whatever you want, Colts fans. Defensive coaching is 10th for me. Matt Eberflus is a top 10 defensive coordinator. He is well on his way to getting a head coach job probably next year. He was close to getting one this year. The home field, that dome, passionate fans to say the least, as we've probably all experienced on Twitter recently. Top 10 home field advantage there. And then the scheme, it's a very diversified coverage team. They are a traditional 4-3 front. A lot of Mike Zimmer influences, I think, on this defense. Just the way they scheme things up. They can run so many different coverages. They get to cover 2 and cover 6 in very creative ways with these safeties as well, and do a good job of rotating these safeties around up and down and trying to confuse quarterbacks. So I love the scheme. They do try to throw off quarterbacks and are effective at doing so. And then just one last look at the team as a whole. You can kind of see there where they would look overall right now, like without Carson and without Quentin Nelson. But this is a full season projection. So like right now, I got him at 27th in the overall ranking. You see the offense coming down to 31st, but I don't think Carson Wentz misses the whole year. I think he comes back week 3, week 4, and they can kind of get back in the groove of things and start to creep back up towards that, top, the 11th ranking, I should just say, as they had previously. The defense ranking 12th, that shouldn't change with the offensive rankings, although there's going to be a little more pressure on that unit. Special teams elite here, man. They've got one of the best kicker-punter duos. The blue-collar culture shows up so consistently with their ability to cover kicks. So it is one of the best special teams in the league, and the culture is very good as well. This is a team that has done a lot of proving people wrong and earning the benefit of the doubt just through the coaching and depth and players that have stepped up that you would not have expected from. So it's one of the better cultures in the league there, ranking 7th. And then the strengths and weaknesses for this team, they're unique. They're a team, as I've said, that they don't have a ton of true strengths, but they really don't have a lot of weaknesses either. It's very unique in that way. A strength for me is overall coach and culture, as we just mentioned, and the offensive line, when healthy, is a legitimate, true dominant strength for them. And then the weakness is, it's injuries, for sure, have crept up early, and that never helps anybody. I would say explosiveness in the receiving game is a bit of a weakness, though the receiving core as a whole, I think the way they use them is fine. And then just question marks at quarterback. Are you getting 2020 Carson Wentz, or are you getting something in between that and MVP Carson Wentz? That's a very real question to ask, as well as the injury there. So interesting look there. You can kind of see it's a very kind of middling, stable team as a whole. And now we take a look at the schedule, which is interesting because of the unique injury scenarios where they're a much worse team in the first month of the season, most likely, to the point where Las Vegas actually doesn't list their over-under right now because nobody knows when Carson will be back here. So no really bet on this deal, but I do have them starting 1-4. I originally had them beating Miami, and I'm just going to say that that's when Carson Wentz comes back. I think that's about when we see. They said 5 to 13 weeks. So if you estimate that right down the middle, that means he'll be back around week 3 or week 4. Again, I don't think this is a doomsday scenario for the Colts, though that's a tough start to their schedule. They have to go to Baltimore the next week. So that's really how I'm painting the first 5 weeks there. But things do lighten up as they go, which is, again, really kind of perfect for if this plays out for the Colts this way. It's almost perfect for them, as I have them finishing, with 4 more losses out of the next 12 games. So finishing 8-4 there, getting Carson back healthy. You got a couple games against Houston, Jacksonville. I think those are games they can win. Tennessee and the Jets at home, very winnable with a healthy Colts team here. They have the Raiders at home, the Patriots at home. So this schedule, it actually kind of plays well for Carson Wentz missing the first few weeks of the season because, Seattle, the Rams, at Tennessee, at Miami, at Baltimore, they were maybe due for a tough start to their schedule anyway. So perhaps this plays out. They win 9 games, as I'm projecting here, and yeah, you're not getting that playoff season you maybe hope for this year, but you build some momentum. Maybe Carson looks good against lesser opponents down the stretch. You get your first round pick because Carson didn't play the 70% of snaps or whatever. And you head into next year having won 8 of 4 or 8 of 12 games and get Carson healthy and first round pick next year. So I think that's a relatively optimistic outlook still for the Colts based on the way people are talking about this team right now. And it's a great transition now towards our interview with Zach Hicks. So I'm going to go ahead and say hit that like button right now. I hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you in a few days for our next deep dive. But until then, guys, enjoy the interview, and we'll see you later. And now I'm thrilled to welcome onto the deep dive Zach Hicks, who covers the Colts and now Broncos for Sports Illustrated. It's at Zach Hicks 2 on Twitter. Great follow. Recommend you guys check him out. Thanks for taking the time. I really appreciate it for coming on, and excited to talk some Colts. How you doing?
Pretty good. I mean, the timing on this couldn't be much worse with everything going on with Carson Wentz. I mean, I don't know if they would rank as high if you had to do Jacob Eason as their starting quarterback.
I know. It's tough because I try to use a formula, and I'm like, well, how do I – I'm not Eric Eager at PFF or anything. I can't come up with some formula that accounts for, potential 1 to 6 week injuries. So I'm just like, well, this is where they would slide. It's tough. Yeah.
It's tough, man. It's tough for all of us, especially. We don't know if he's going to be ready for week 1, which he definitely could be, or if he's going to be out till week 6, 7, or it's the Colts. It could be for the rest of his career. We have no clue.
Oh man.
We have no clue.
Hey, that rings home. I've got Andrew sitting right next to me here.
Yeah.
So
Andrew Luck retiring is like the where were you at when it happened moment with Colts fans.
I was just gonna say that, dude.
Yeah. And even me, like, I'm not a Colts fan. I just cover the team. It's still like that for me. Even I was just watching a movie and I went over to my phone with a million notifications. And it's like, now every time someone gets hurt, we're like, oh crap, here it comes again.
I know, man. I was at Dairy Queen. I remember it like it was yesterday.
Yeah.
Well, that was actually my first talking point, which is not a surprise. But like, what do you mentioned like the timetable, so we don't need to really go back to that. But are you expecting just Jacob Eason until Wentz comes back, or do you see any other moves coming in or anything like that?
I would say that they probably bring in some veteran guy off the street to be his backup early in the year, maybe try to get Ellinger onto the practice squad. Because I just don't think Ellinger is ready. I don't know if he'll ever be ready. I wasn't a huge fan of his film. I like a lot of what he can do under 10 yards. It's just once you get past 10 yards, it's not great. And that's not really something that's going to work in the NFL. But, I feel like you have to go with Jacob Eason unless he's like just atrocious here in the training camp and off season. I mean, you spend a 4th round pick on him. You've already spent what could be a 1st round pick on Wentz if he comes back quick enough, and a 3rd round on Wentz. So you don't want to keep throwing out more picks for quarterbacks along with this 4th rounder you spent on Eason. So, I mean, you've put so much into the position. You drafted Eason for a reason. Even though that stretch is super, super tough, especially for a young quarterback to start the year, you kind of have to baptize him with fire here to start the year and kind of throw him into it. And it's tough for him. It's honestly, as someone who kind of liked Eason as a prospect but didn't love him, it's almost like a no-win situation for him. I really think it's going to be tough for him to find success early in the year, but you kind of have to do it. I mean, at this point, you've invested that into him, and he was going to be the backup going into the year. If you're not going to start him now, you're never going to start him. So it's just kind of his time, and hopefully he's ready come week 1.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. I think you kind of bite the bullet. Like, the injury sucks. Maybe they are waiting around. I don't think they trade for Nick Foles, but if he gets cut, I wouldn't be stunned to see
maybe
them bring him in. But yeah, I think it's Easton. It'll be at least fun to see and get a look at him. I know a lot of Colts fans were constantly kind of badgering me and seeing if I think he has upside as a future starter and all this stuff. Yeah, not really, but it'll be fun to see him.
Yeah, I'm excited. It'll be fun. I mean, he's definitely not Jacoby Brissett where he's just not going to throw the ball. Like, he's going to throw it. He's going to be very, Drew Lock, or he's going to throw it. It might be in the triple coverage, but he's going to throw it.
Yep.
So it's going to be fun. So I mean, that's the best. Honestly, that's the best I expect out of him. So if anything's better, if they even win, like say he has to play the first 5 weeks. If they win one of those games with him starting, I consider that a win. Like it's a tough stretch. There's 5 straight playoff teams.
What is it 5 straight? Yeah, I haven't actually looked at it yet. But
it goes Seahawks, Rams, Titans, Dolphins, Ravens.
Yeah,
that's tough.
That is tough.
Oof. Yeah, like it's actually probably good for Wentz because say he misses the first 4 or 5 games, he comes back for the easier games throughout the rest of the year, make him maybe look a little better, and Eason just kind of falls on the bullet to start the season. But yeah, those first couple games are rough. Like if you're gonna miss any games, I guess if you're Carson Wentz, those are the ones to miss.
I guess there is a world where it ends up actually in a weird way being good for the Colts. If he misses that time, you still get your first round pick potentially. Might not happen this year, but what if Wentz comes back week 7? He looks great. They heat up and you head into next year with a first round pick and a ton of hype. I mean, that could easily play out. So all hope is definitely not lost. And yeah,
maybe just for this year, hope might be a little lost, but for the future, it's actually probably looking a little better.
Potentially. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I do want to talk about Darius Leonard a little bit because
hopefully Colts fans aren't watching at this point.
all the Leonard Hive guys, they already left at this point.
That's good. That's good.
But after my linebacker portion, so you're free to I wanted to talk about like the contract situation because I was listening to Ballard on I think it was The Athletic with Robert Mays. He went on and did an interview.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he usually goes on Robert Mays.
He was talking about not paying B players A money. And I
mean, you've already said it probably earlier in the show. So, I mean,
I know that's my opinion on Leonard. He is a very good linebacker.
Yeah.
But when you and Fred Warner just totally reshook the market, I'm curious if you think there's a chance that just seeing that new money come in, if maybe Ballard is taking a second look at this, because it has taken a little bit more time than like I thought it was going to happen a couple days later. It's taken a little bit longer here. So I'm wondering if you think it's a lock that they pay him or if you think it's possible that they're maybe playing hardball a little bit more.
Man, it's legitimately the most fascinating contract conversation I've probably ever seen. Like I like legitimately, it's not me just trying to be saying hyperbole for my team that I cover. It's fascinating because on one hand, I'm with you. I think he's, like a B plus type player, and I wouldn't pay him A+ money because I do think he's limited. I do think he has struggles in coverage. I do think he limited in the run game because he has to be kept completely clean. There's a lot of issues. I think anytime that he's not playing forward, you have issues in his game. And, for maybe 12, 13, 14 million a year, I could do it, but 20 a year, like that's when you get close to it. But you have to factor in that the players in that locker room see him as an A player. He sees himself as a above A+ player. So, he is the vocal leader of the locker room. He's huge in the community. I mean, it's tough because say you don't pay him or you trade him away. Well, how can you be the guy that preaches pay your own, play through the draft, and you got this 2-time All-Pro and you're not going to pay him? And it's a tough thing to sell to your locker room. But on the other hand, is paying him really help your team or hurt your team going forward? I kind of is like stuck between a rock and a hard place with this contract dispute. And I think ultimately they're going to end up paying him. It's probably just over, a couple things here and there that they're going to clean up. And this is completely speculative. This isn't 100% what's going on. But I wonder if him not having the COVID vaccine and everything with that does kind of play into it as well. Because, the Colts are like the least vaccinated team in the league right now. I wonder how much that plays into it, because I know the Colts are pretty frustrated about being the least vaccinated team. I wonder if that's also kind of holding up a little bit. Again, that's speculation that I don't know completely, but there's just so many factors in this. And ultimately, whatever Ballard does, it's going to be the toughest decision, I think, of his career outside of trying to figure out that quarterback position.
Yeah.
I would probably not pay him, but if I were a GM in charge of a locker room, in charge of an organization, it would be hard to explain that to people. So it really is an insanely hard decision. And I'm glad I'm not Chris Fowler trying to make that
I
decision.
know. Yeah. And I'm definitely not going to criticize him if and when they do pay him. I just
Yeah.
think it is a fascinating conversation to say,
Hmm.
look at that $20 million number. That's eating up, what is that, 12, 13% of your cap space? That's a huge chunk. And usually, if you're paying that guy and he's a non quarterback, especially in the modern NFL, every analytic would tell you that it's got to be someone that makes an elite impact in the passing game,
Yeah.
whether getting after the quarterback or in coverage. And he does, I mean, he can rush the passer, but a lot of linebackers can do that.
Yep.
So it's like, it's an interesting
Well, and
everything
it's
about it.
scary too, because like I'm not saying Matt Eberflus is the greatest defense court in the league, but what's Darius Leonard going to be post Matt Eberflus? Because Eberflus is going to get a head coaching job soon. Like he was close this
Absolutely.
year, if not this next year, the year after. He's going to get one. What is Darius Leonard when he's not in this cover three scheme that plays him in these short zones, that blitzes him and does quarterback spies on every single pass play that he's involved in, has Bobby Okereke do all the super hard coverage details? What is Darius Leonard if he's asked to do more? If he's asked to do what Fred Warner does, what is he? And honestly, I don't think he is that kind of player. I think he's very good. I think he's the type of guy where keep everything in front of him and just kind of let him go. And he's very good. It's just, is that $20 million worth a year? I don't think so.
No.
That's where Colts fans come after me too. I mean, I get a lot of people who hate me for it as well, but um, it really is fascinating.
He's much closer to Blake Martinez than he is Fred Warner, in my opinion. And that 2020 Blake Martinez, not
Yeah.
Blake Martinez before that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think they'll pay him. And
Yeah.
I think eventually this is maybe a little takey, but I think the Colts fans might eventually catch up to it once that price tag comes in and they see like, oh man, yeah.
I think once Eberflus leaves and his play and the numbers kind of come down a little bit, depending on who they. I mean, if they bring in like a guy that Flus is mentoring and it's like the same defense, maybe it'll stay. But yeah, man, I don't know. I just see it being a deal that the Colts regret in a couple of years, and I'm hopefully I'm wrong, and Leonard becomes a Fred Warner type player and can do it all. But I just don't see it happening.
Yeah. All right. Next up, I wanted to talk a little bit about the offense, just a couple of players. So I was just putting together my fantasy rankings, and I don't typically talk a lot of stats in fantasy football, but I thought it was really fascinating that Jonathan Taylor was RB7 for ESPN, and I wanted to get your opinion on if you think he is going to get that like full workload, or with Marlon Mack coming back, is it going to be a little more of a split than maybe that seventh ranking would indicate? Because I think it's more of a split than that. I think he's a beast, but I also think the Colts are a smart team, and they're not going to just drive him into the ground if they're not winning a ton of football games. So
yeah. Well, think about last year. He had 3 games last year under 10 carries. I think he had 4 games under 30 yards rushing, and he still was third in the league in rushing yards last year. So they know how to keep their guys fresh, and he's still going to get his numbers. But yeah, I mean, if you're looking at Derek, if you want like Derrick Henry type carries for him, like the Colts offense is not that. I mean, even before Marlon Mack came back, you still had Nyheim Hines, who's going to take every snap under 2 or 3 minutes left in the second quarter. And anytime they're trailing in the second half, it's going to be all Nyheim Hines. And that's not even because Jonathan Taylor's a bad pass catcher or anything. It's just Nyheim Hines is that good. So yeah, I mean, he's going to split, and the Colts are always like that. And there's going to be even games where, like we saw against Detroit this year, where Jordan Wilkins got 25 carries just because he was running a little bit better in that game. And I'm not saying Jordan Wilkins
sounds so ridiculous when you say it, but
yeah, it's not because Jordan Wilkins isn't this elite back or anything like that. But there's going to be games where to start the game, Taylor's going to get stuffed a couple times, and Mack's going to have some big runs, and it's going to be a Marlon Mack game, and Taylor might only get 6, 7, 8 carries. And I don't think that's going to be the norm, but there's going to be a couple games like that. So I don't know. I don't really get into fantasy. I used to in high school, and I just kind of fell out of it the second I really started climbing with this career. It's really hard to get into fantasy when you're around the players and you're doing all this stuff. But yeah, fantasy, man, I don't know. I don't know if I would have Taylor that high. I would try to go more for like a bell cow type guy. And I just don't think Taylor is that. I think he's going to be really efficient and get, a lot of good carries, good yards per carry and stuff. But I don't know how well it's going to translate to fantasy, especially because Wentz and maybe Eason are not really guys who target running backs in the past game either.
Cool. Yeah, and then are you pretty stoked about Paris Campbell coming back? Because I thought, or what did he get hurt today or something?
No, I mean, I want to be stoked. It's so hard, man. Like, man, he is so exciting, like so electric. And I mean, the one game he played last year, it was like, okay, this is gonna be the year.
It wasn't just like, okay, he's back, like let's see what he can do. It was like, oh my God, like he was out there balling out, like running route, like clean cut routes. He looked amazing. And then of course.
Yeah. And it's just like, and the thing is too, like all these injuries aren't like injury prone player. Like he never was injured in college, and they're all just different injuries. One's in his leg, one's in his arm, one's in his ankle. Like it's just different ankle, like different legs and stuff too. Like it's, man, it sucks, man. It's just horrible luck for him. And you kind of get to the point where going into year 3, you can't rely on him, but you kind of have big hopes for him. And honestly, if I were a fantasy guy looking at any receiver in the Colts offense, especially given that you can probably get Campbell later than all the other guys, like Campbell's by far and away the guy. Because if he does stay healthy, obviously it's a huge if, he could definitely lead this team in receptions and yards this year. I mean, he's got that ability. I think he's a better player than like Michael Pittman. So yeah, man, I want to be super excited for him. Like we all do. We all want to be super pumped. He's got the new number and everything too. Like we all want to see that number 1. But
watch, he's going to be healthy, and then Eason's going to just be the worst quarterback we've ever seen. And then Wentz will get back and he'll tweak his ankle, and it's just like nothing ever works for him. Ugh.
Oh, dude, it's rough. We're excited though. I mean, I'm excited. I know a lot of us are excited just to see him play. I just please stay healthy. I don't even care if he like barely touches the ball. Just get through one season. Like, healthy,
well, I feel like they're also kind of counting on him because they didn't really do. I mean, they brought Ty back, but they waited till the 7th round to add a receiver
who might not make the team.
Right.
So this year's receiving core really comes down to the development of Michael Pittman Jr. and Paris Campbell. And, Pascal and Hilton are going to be fine, but those two guys are the big thing. Maybe Des Patman too. Like we'll see. But he was a flyer. We'll see what happens with him. But yeah, man, it's Michael Pittman Jr. and Paris Campbell, and see what they can do.
Cool. So I got a couple spots on the defense I just want to get your opinions on. So there's a lot of moving pieces with that number 2 edge spot. It looks like Pay is plugging in on the right side. Yeah. And then, I mean, they bring back Muhammad, who's just a solid early down option, but they're really going to need more in the pass rush other than him. And it's hard to even like pinpoint after that who's going to be getting the reps and who's standing out. So I'm curious, as someone that's covered the team, if you have a better sense of who's going to really fill in or has the potential there for this year.
I would say the starters day 1, almost locked in stone. It's going to be Tyquan Lewis on one side, and it's going to be Kwity Paye on the other. But after that, it's kind of a crapshoot, like whoever is going to stand out. I know Kamoko Touré's had a really strong camp, but he's kind of like Paris Campbell on defense, where it's hard to rely on him. He's going into year 4, and he's had 4 good games in his whole career. And they happened all at the same time, all in a row. And he was one of the best pass rushers in football until he broke his ankle. And, it's another thing where it just sucks, but he's had a strong camp. I know Ben Banagou's had a good camp, and I know he's been kind of under the wing of DeForest Buckner this offseason. So that could be big if he could, if he could be a solid like sub rusher, that's huge. And then when Dio comes back, whenever he comes back, he'll obviously plug into that rotation. But it's kind of just like the receiver core where you're relying on those young guys to step up, like Tyquan Lewis to build off the year he had last year, Kwity Paye to show some flashes. I don't think he's going to be a superstar day 1, but he's got the potential to be great. But he's got to just show the flashes. And then one of Touré or Banagou, or maybe both, they can just be quality sub guys. That'll be huge. But yeah, you got to hope for at least 1 or 2 of those young guys to really break out.
Is Justin Houston hasn't signed anywhere yet, right?
He signed today with the Ravens.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was in my 24-hour stream when that happened. So that, I guess, was just a blurb. Yeah. Yeah. I thought he would have been a nice piece to bring back, honestly, just as a mentor for pay, but I guess I get it.
Yeah, no, he was a great mentor. The issue is it just ate up those snaps from those young guys. Like you're going into year 3 with Banogu, year 4 with Toure, and we have no clue what they are, like
Yeah.
at all. Banogu didn't play at all last year. Toure has been injured, and then when he has been healthy, he's been getting like 15 to 20% snaps. So it's like, yes, it's concerning how young that group is, but like I'm ready to see them thrown into the fire.
For
Like
sure.
this whole year is an evaluation year. Like it really is, especially now with the Wentz injury. You know, see what you have in Eason, see what you have in Pittman Jr. and Paris Campbell, see what you have in these defensive ends. And then I'm assuming the next spot you're going to get to is see what you have in cornerback too, with those young guys out there. I mean, it's really just see what you have with all these positions, which I'm kind of excited for. You know, I mean, if it works, it works. If it flames out and you know sucks, then you can kind of go from there.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And I think a lot of Colts fans probably don't want to hear that, but it's kind of a hard truth. Like they've been kind of slowly building. And
dude, people were coming to me the other day when I was saying that, like, even with Wentz, they weren't a Super Bowl contender. You know, they were a playoff hopeful team that had a really good, like, had a good roster, but it's a lot of ifs. You know, like there's so many ifs. Like this team could be a contender if you know young defensive ends step up, if wide receiver breaks out, if Wentz returns to what he is, if one of those young corners step up and take down cornerback 2, odds are you're not going to get all of those to happen at once.
Exactly.
So you got to hope for at least a couple to hit, and then you got to go from there and go next year. And hopefully the one that hits is Carson Wentz, you know, being Carson Wentz again.
Fans love to give just the absolute benefit of the doubt to everything on the roster. And it just doesn't, even the best teams in the league, it just doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
Cool. What was your overall takeaway from this year's draft? Because I honestly was a little underwhelmed by the final results of the draft. So I'm just curious where you ended up coming in on the draft.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of said weeks before the draft, or probably months before the draft, they got Kwity Paye somehow. I couldn't complain about the rest of the draft. So, I mean, I feel like I can't complain. You know, they got Kwity Paye. The Dio pick was interesting. I definitely didn't like it at the time. I've come around a little bit on it. I'm still curious to see what he's going to look like after the Achilles injury. He's a freak. I mean, he's a complete freak. He's super, super raw. But he's apparently got a good head on his shoulders, good work ethic. So, I mean, we'll see where that goes. But yeah, after that, it's hard when you don't have a 3rd round pick and then you're just kind of taking shots. A couple of the picks on day 3 were iffy for me. I'm not a huge fan of Sean Davis at all. Really, I didn't like his film. Yep. Sam Ehlinger, I wouldn't have drafted him. Just, you know, I don't take day 3 quarterbacks. I don't see the point. But I liked a couple. You know, Will Fries I really liked. I had a 4th round grade on him. Kylan Granson, I had an early 4th on him. That's around where he went. So I like that pick as well. So I think they have, you know, I think they can get some good, you know, production out of this class. But Kwity Paye is obviously the highlight of it. And hopefully, you know, I don't think it's going to be year 1 or maybe even year 2, but hopefully he can kind of become a stud in this league. And I think he has all the ability to.
Do you think he can get up to be like that alpha type?
I think he can. I mean, and he's going to, you know, the benefit for him is he's going to be young playing with one of the best pass rushing interior guys in the league right next to him. You know, that's where Buckner plays, that 3 tech right next to his end spot. So you're going to be working stunts off of him. You're going to be getting just that one-on-one. I mean, Gibbons can be left tackles, but, you know, you're going to be getting those one-on-ones more often than not. So I think he's going to have every kind of way to succeed that you can for a young pass rusher. And he has all the traits, all the ability. He has the work ethic. It's just a matter of putting it all together because he is a really raw pass rusher. And that's definitely going to show in year 1. But I think he has all the ability to be great. And that's why he was my edge 1 in this class. I was really, really high on his traits.
Yeah. I could see, I think my ceiling comp was Za'Darius Smith, who's kind of right on the fringe of an alpha or a high end number 2.
Yeah, which is perfectly great. I mean, if you get that with the 21st pick, like, hell yeah, easy. Take that. If you get Za'Darius Smith from anywhere in the draft, you take that, you know?
Yeah. I loved his just quickness. And I think Eberflus with the stunts with Buckner next to him, you have so much potential to get creative there. So that I think just alone in the stunt game has elite potential.
Yeah.
Cool. So the last kind of note I have here is just a thought I had today about, you know, just thinking about Leonard and all of the accumulation of talent they've kind of started to pay for now. You've got Grover Stewart and Buckner, and they're going to have to pay Quentin Nelson and Darius Leonard. If you look at wins above replacement or any kind of analytic, those are typically not positions of value. I would say Buckner is the one guy that plays a true position of value as a pass rushing interior. I think a couple of those in isolation are okay to really pay up for, pay for a running back here, pay for a nose tackle here, pay for a run defending linebacker here. But I am just curious, like you start to throw all that money into those positions that aren't typically difference making positions. And I guess my question here is, are you worried about that? Am I totally off, or is it just kind of in Ballard we trust at this moment?
Well, luckily you didn't bring on like a pure Colts fan who's going to just say, don't worry about anything. The team's got it. We're going to be great. Super Bowl. No, it's really funny. I mean, Chris Ballard, we can all agree, is a really good GM, one of the best in the league. But all of his hits have come at positions of not value, like, right tackle, which is valuable, but it's, you're paying him nearly $20 million a year. Darius Leonard, really good player, $20 million a year. That's a lot for, analytically, it's not. Like Fred Warner is the closest you get to being at value for that. Grover Stewart, like you said, even though I'm all for paying him, I love Grover Stewart, but like you said, I mean, he's a run defending defensive tackle. Yeah. So all that kind of adds up, and it really comes down to kind of what we talked about earlier, where you need these guys on rookie deals to really step up and hit. And by the time you would end up having to pay them, Grover Stewart would probably be off his deal, and Braden Smith would be towards the later years. Darius Leonard would be a little bit into his. So you really need these young guys that he's drafted. You need those hits to continue, but you need them to continue with positions of value. You can't, like, don't get me wrong, it's great hitting on a Darius Leonard, it's great hitting on a Braden Smith, but when you're missing on your Rock Ya-Sins and your Kamoka Ture's, Ben Banagoos, Michael Pittman's, I'm not saying those are all misses right now, but if you're missing on those, your wide receivers, your defensive end, your corners, that's where you're really going to fail as a team, as team building. And you can't just keep plugging those gaps, with veterans. You can't just Xavier Rhodes every single year, T.Y. Hilton every single year, Justin Houston every year. You eventually need to hit on young talent there and have those guys step up. So that's kind of the next step we're in right now as a franchise. Is we know Chris Ballard is a great GM. We know he knows how to draft, and we're showing that by paying these stars and these all pros that he's got. But these other ones that he's drafted after that, they need to, now it's their turn, and it's funny that probably the most likely one is Julian Blackmon of the next one. And he's, again, as a safety, it's like, can we get a corner, or can we get a receiver, or get a defensive end? And, hopefully it's Kwity Paye that steps up there. But yeah, man, I completely see that. I mean, it's weird because, like, you're happy that you got these all pros and you're happy you hit here, but like, at the end of the day, it's like, are they really contributing to wins as much as these misses would have if they were the hits? It's crazy. It's crazy.
That's really well said. Yeah, really well said. Okay, real quick. I did this with our last guest. Little mini game. I'm just going to throw a Colts player at you, and I just want the first three words, the first three traits that come to your mind when I say that player. DeForest Buckner.
Elite, superstar. That swim move that he has, or whatever, just swim or whatever, like
swimming.
Insane, man. That swim move is, I mean, it's unblockable. I feel bad for offensive line.
He's closing in on Chris Jones, I think.
He is. I think he's in that top three combo. For sure. Yeah.
Madden robbed him.
Yeah.
All right. Julian Blackmon.
Promising, ball hawk. Consistency is going to be the last thing there. I want to see the consistency throughout a year. He kind of faded down the stretch. I want to see that consistency pop up.
Grover Stewart.
Oh, dude, that's my favorite guy. Yeah. Powerful. Just kind of run stuffer with the hyphen in between. We're going to do that. And just kind of next step is, like, I know it's two words, but like next step is what you got to show that you're more than just a run defender, So I'm kind of doing it two positives and one negative.
That's fine.
But yeah.
A Reef talked for like 30 minutes during this segment, so you're doing great.
the quick hitter is digging it for an hour.
Jonathan Taylor.
Man, I mean, kind of everything you could like, just stud, explosive, powerful. I mean, again, kind of next step with him too, just making sure that you're also productive against good run defenses. He kind of feasted on really bad ones last year. Kind of consistency throughout the year, but man, he's so explosive and so fun to watch.
If I could have forwards, I would say blue collar Leonard Fournette.
Yeah. The hardworking Leonard Fournette
Yes.
who can do a little bit more.
Yes.
I like it.
All right,
like
man. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on. That was a really fun convo. Really good insight on the Colts. Everyone, make sure you go follow Zach on Twitter. And is there anything else you want to plug here? I know you're just taking over some Broncos coverage too. So
yeah, I mean, if you guys are Broncos fans watching this, I'll be over on Mile High Huddle covering the Broncos as well. Kind of in a part-time, just kind of film gig. If the film ever comes back, I will be doing film there. Also with SI Colts, Horseshoe Huddle, covering the Colts all year. But yeah, guys, I appreciate you tuning in, and obviously, Colts fans hate you, so I don't know how many of them are actually watching this. I'm on with just a Madden guy that doesn't know what he's talking about right now.
That's it. You nailed it, man.
You and Andre, man, are like enemy number one with Colts fans. Like, there's a couple that I'm sure are watching that like you, but man, say one bad thing about Darius Leonard and you're on.
It's the most unique hive I've ever seen. They just go and go